Hey everyone, welcome to Chat B2B, the podcast that gives you a front row seat to AI and B2B marketing. I'm your host, Andrew Rao, co-CEO of Intercept, and today's guest is Jessica Hreha. She's been at the forefront of AI in marketing for years. She helped found the Marketing AI Council at VMware. She helped build the AI Transformation Office at Jasper, and she's now leading Marketing AI Transformation at Veeam. In our conversation, Jessica explains why AI pilots are failing, how to go from experimentation to scaled adoption, and where AI is making the biggest impact for marketers today. If you like what you hear, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This is Chat B2B. Let's get into it. First off, I just want to say congrats on your new role at Veeam. I when I came across the new role, when I saw the job announcement, I was like, there's so much, talk on AI taking jobs, and your role is actually proof that it also creates jobs, because marketing AI transformation is not I feel like it will become a staple within marketing orgs, but it certainly isn't today. So I thought we could start with, in practice, what does your role look like day to day?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm also building a team, so we can chat on that too. Look, I've been saying for a long time that AI is a part of all of our jobs already. And when AI transformation is everyone's job, it's also no one's job. And so I'm sure our audience too can recognize the tension between wanting to streamline strategy and activities and learning and acceleration with impact and everyone's full-time jobs that they already have. So even when I was at VMware, I was running our Marketing AI Council, 32 people, bi-weekly updates to the CMO, tracking official pilots, and my team of 9 or 10 in the global demand content strategy team. And it would have been, I wouldn't have been able to keep going in those two spaces. So I look at it in a lot of the same way as I think what I probably would have kept doing at VMware had the acquisition not happened as well, which is, how do we move forward? How do we define what we're doing from an AI perspective to marketing? So we're not just doing AI, but we have a mission and a vision, and it's strategic, and our activity matches that strategic alignment. So coming in new here too, it's things like a readiness assessment, kind of where is the organization from a maturity perspective. And then the same 3 pillars I've been talking about for the past couple of years too, the foundational AI literacy, which is skills and knowledge, and just not skills and knowledge, right? Because it's the mindset shift of that whole piece. The strategic use case identification, which is also different from personal productivity and experimentation, and that path from pilot to scale, and the change leadership aspect, which is how do we communicate across teams? How do we move all this siloed activity potentially into organized and impactful activity, I guess, too, but also creating this community internally of shared learning, of bringing everyone along the journey, no matter where they are, and this like culture of innovation. So there are different pieces to each of that, including, what it looks like a state of AI in your organization and turning that into your marketing AI roadmap. And what does that look like from a tech roadmap perspective? Where's the leadership in terms of leading by example, experimentation sentiment? Where are the enthusiasts in the organization? How do we tap into those? Because there's goodness happening in every organization as well. And then what does this look like from a strategic perspective? Because as you know, I've also been saying for a long time, AI is not the strategy and it's not a strategy, right? So it's kind of then interesting, you would say, then you have an entire role around this. So it's like, well, it's enablement and adoption to really impact our marketing goals that we have today. And so driving purposeful activity through outcomes.
It sounds like to me, this is, you've got an HR component, which is around team skilling. You've got a strategy component around like use case, identifying core use cases, which is kind of like ops. And then you're also probably interfacing with IT. So this is kind of like if it's like a hub and spoke model, you're like the hub that's kind of coordinating or orchestrating all these teams with the obviously focus on AI.
Yeah. And I realized I went high level and didn't go day to day, like your question from that perspective. But yes, where are the roadblocks today? And a lot of times I find generally in enterprise orgs too, especially if you get out of the vendor environment that I was into, it's the perception is it's corporate technology and governance roadblocks, right? So it's like, we're not allowed to do this. We can't do that. When at the same time, it's, well, there's reasons for that. And there is a process, or there needs to be a process, or the process just hasn't been communicated to you. So it's creating relationships throughout the entire organization to say, I actually agree that we have to have a responsible governance policy here, and understanding that we can't just go swipe a credit card for every AI tool we want to. And so now it's my job to make sure that our marketing team members know that as well, and that we're building operational rigor around business case creation. And that's one of my big kind of like anchor points I talk about a lot, and as you know, have for a long time too. It's that we're not just doing AI to do AI, but has to be a reason here. And we have to demonstrate a potential business impact in order to build the business case internally to do the work, right? Like, how do we know that this is valuable, worthwhile work for us to do unless we understand how it's going to impact?
I was actually just going to ask you that, which is, I feel like you spin up something so interesting like marketing AI transformation, you're going to have a lot of people at the door going, hey, I've got a use case. How you got a use case? How do you actually help them say, is this a problem we're solving? Or in some cases, frankly, what I see is some people will say, oh, I didn't know AI could do that. Let's go almost create a problem that aligns with the AI capability. It's like doing AI for the sake of AI. Like, how do you tell the team kind of like what is worthwhile doing versus like what's a flashy thing that we just want to do for fun?
Yeah, I think there is some of like just capturing organic conversations around potential use cases. Also, because person in this role hopefully has experience of knowing what makes a good use case from that perspective. I do think some of the use cases are like, well, that's automation. And I'm glad we're all in this era where we understand that automation is a thing we can do as marketers and should do, right? And prioritize.
We need more of it.
Yeah. But I think there's also some organizations too, though, that are like, I only think of this as a personal productivity tool. So they don't understand yet what AI can do from a workflow perspective. So you have to show them. So I think that there's still a need for showcasing what are the potential workflows, like even end to end, that AI can do, so that you can inspire people to think about how that can change their role. But ultimately, it's a process and a conversation around like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And what's stopping you from hitting your goals? Like, what's hard? And potentially, and how do you measure that, right? And all of that. And then potentially, is there an AI or automation use case there? And I think the leaders actually in organizations have a better knowledge concept around what that could look like. Sometimes I've been saying for a long time, like, it has to come bottoms up, but I think right now I'm also understanding that leaders understand end to end how things get done. So they can see the bigger picture of how AI could help, like for content supply chain, let's say, right? Where sometimes the individual players only see their one piece of a process. And so it also may be too narrow for them to think about how they could use AI in a more transformational way, other than just like ideating, for example.
Yeah. I love the way that you almost sequentially went through that, and you put AI and automation at the end. Because I think that is like really it. It's, what are you trying to do? Like, to your point, what is the outcome, and thinking beyond also individual productivity, but then figuring out what you're trying to do and then putting AI and automation at the end. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. So I think about it in a pyramid too, just to double click on that as use cases are at the bottom, your business outcomes are in the middle, and your value drivers are at the top. And a lot of people who are just diving into it start at the use case level and like never quite make it to like what are the actual business outcomes they're going for, let alone like where does marketing drive value in the organization in terms of the org goals. But in a workshop setting or conversational setting, or even just personally thinking about today, if you're listening to this podcast, what are the goals of my organization? How do I contribute to that, either as a leader or as an individual? How am I measured from a success perspective? And then, like I said, like what's keeping me from hitting my goals? And we all have KPIs and goals for a reason, right? Like more, better, be more, better, different. And we have those as hopefully lofty goals so that we can stretch and do more. But there's something keeping us back from doing more. Maybe it's that like we know we should do vertical content, but we don't have the resources to do it today because we're just not staffed or budgeted that way, right? And then really just backing into like potentially what could help me hit my goal. And you might get to that very personal productivity thing that you spend too much time on that keeps you from doing like uber creative work, or you might come up with an entirely new use case or workflow, like creating vertical content to reach an audience that you can't reach today, just as another tangible example.
Great one. And I think a very practical one, because that's something that we always see coming up is like, how do we do personalization well? Like we've always been, B2B, personalization, we've always wanted to do it, but I don't think as an industry, we've done a great job of it. But now with AI, to your point, verticalized content or persona specific content, like you could really push it. I wanted to touch on one other point that you'd mentioned around like adoption. And I know you've been a great advocate for how you go from sort of pilot or POC to adoption at scale. And you talked a lot about that at Jasper as well in the past. But can you just kind of go over like maybe what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen, like when you try and get from that like POC or like pilot hamster wheel and you're trying to get this to adoption at scale? I feel like a lot of people struggle. Like, I don't know, what do you see on that?
I think it's a couple of challenges. It's like, boiling the ocean, but like if I had to break it down, right? It's like finding the right use cases. Understanding the baseline and having that process documented. So if the status quo, and do we have this process document today to understand what this takes? And then the third challenge is integration. So like if I unpack that a little bit, right? Like it's hard to scale pilots if you don't know if they're successful or not. Right. So I think we keep on this hamster wheel because we're like, well, now we're just doing AI. Right. And like, so now I just need everyone to do it. But without that impact lever of like, we are now getting into market 20% faster. We're saving 3-week lead time, or we're saving money, right? Because this process was brought in-house or whatever it is, right? Like understanding the baseline time, cost, performance, and then what is our success hypothesis? And then actually going back and like tracking it, like 30, 60, 90, like did we do it or not? And that's just kind of pilot like operational rigor, like how are we managing this as a project, making sure that we've got the right people in there and we understand the processes that we're also testing in that environment. Once you have that, like this has been proven to do successful XYZ, now hopefully because you found the right use case, which is not individual, right? It's a use case that multiple people touch. Now you go to those other team members and you say, look at the success we're having. Now I'm teaching you this new process. And this just becomes the new way of work related to this potential use case. So I feel like sounds so simple, and I feel like is yet so often skipped because everyone's just rushing into the doing of everything and then not understanding what that actually meant. And then they also don't understand what process they're even doing with AI to teach other people how to do it. And then you just have like constant experimentation, right? And like it's kind of working. We can't imagine our life without AI, but like we also don't know what to show for it or how to tell you like how we do it. And then the third piece of that, how you continue to scale, is the integration factor, right? And that becomes a challenge because now you've got corporate technology involved. APIs sound really simple, and automation sounds also really simple. And there's all these tools. And I love that agencies are like, well, you just plug N8N into Claude and you have like artifacts, and like it doesn't work that way in an enterprise, right? Like in order to build automation, even to request automation, sometimes you have to go through your corporate IT team, right? To talk about what you're going to do. And depending on your governance levels, you might have to go up to a committee, right? Like, or internal IT led AI council to do that type of work too. So that's why you've got to have that solid business case. Like, why is this work valuable? Doing also to remind you as you're going through the process, like, this is worthwhile. I can get through this, right? To get to the other side too, because that integration layer is ultimately, I think, how you scale and make it repeatable over time.
I love that. And really the point I think that, you had said is like, hey, some of this is like really just, back to being brilliant at the basics, like the measuring your baseline or understanding what your baseline is. I feel like that's the number one thing they want to skip over it. They're like, I don't really care. Or they'll say, I think I know. And we're like, well, how much does it cost? Like, how much time, how much money, who's involved? They haven't really had to map out what their SOPs are on some of these processes. So then exactly to your point, you go through this whole, AI project and they're like, I don't know if it's successful.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. Why is that so common? I don't know.
I think it's like everyone's just excited to get to the work and get in there and try things out. And that also goes back to my day to day. It's like having conversations like these to say like, okay, let's take a step back and think about like, if we do this project, what does this mean to the business? Okay, well, the way we get that is by understanding the process today and what that means to the business, right? And then if we can save time, if we can increase conversions because we know, right, like certain types of ads convert over others. Like, we have to actually build an awareness and engagement and revenue number here. And we're all going to have a better story to tell because of that. And that's the work that everyone just wants to gloss over and get into it. But I think that's where you discover the ROI, the impact, and was this worth doing? And I'm actually creating change within my organization, even not in my role, but in those other teams' roles too.
Yeah, no, great point. And speaking of impact, I feel like there's a debate right now on like where AI delivers the most impact. Is it on like front facing sort of customer engagement or customer campaigns, or is it more like back office functions like ops where things are a little bit more, repeatable? There's fewer, there's less variable change. I don't know. Like, I feel like people are on both sides of this discussion. Where do you kind of sit on this one?
Yeah. I'm probably a little bit biased because I'm a little bit more focused my background from a content and campaigns perspective. So I do think that it's campaign related, but it's the back office operations in terms of getting the brief created and then getting the content into draft and then getting to those variation cycles, kind of that overall, like, not to overuse it, like that content supply chain aspect of it, or even like image enhancements. We're seeing, not we, but in general, I think I'm hearing more in the industry, right? In terms of like, we're able to create the exact image we're looking for. And it may have taken the same amount of time, but like, that's not, what does that mean? Well, that means more people might look at our ads, right? But it's a very back end like design process, I guess. But it's not the personal productivity. I think is the easy part that everyone's talking about. But to your point, and I just maintain it's really hard to measure impact from that perspective. But if you're actually touching something that goes into production or gets produced, whatever that is, you can put really hard numbers on it. And because it goes into market or you're delivering it to stakeholders or there's deadlines, right? There's more project aspect to it, then you're able to measure impact than just like using AI as a thought partner.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. I also, I'm just kind of going through your experience. I know at VMware, you founded the Marketing AI Council. At Jasper, you built the AI transformation office. Maybe you can comment on just why sort of structures like that are important, like these councils or dedicated teams. I feel like some people want to skip that. Why is that really important as you think about scaled adoption and execution at scale?
Yeah, especially in larger organizations, I will say too. There are 7 to 10 functional areas in a global marketing organization, maybe more, right? And then you have regions. And it's very easy for each leader to do their own thing and set up their own enablement and their own prompt workshops and their own like, okay, we're going to use AI for this and talk about it in this way. And then all of a sudden everyone's at different levels or doing slightly different things, or doing redundant work, like having a prompt library in each region, for example, or something like that, right?
Right.
So, and also, even though you have people like me in this dedicated role or in this new role, right? I can't do this all myself either across a large organization. So this cross-functional group of doers, as I like to call it, usually director level and below, representing each function and each region, also help create that champions network, the AI champions network, and influencers. So it allows you to make sure you're looking at use cases across the entire org. And every week I hear a new one that I think might pop up higher on my like priority scale. And this is part of like building the roadmap from that perspective. But if I hadn't had that conversation with that one team, right, or found that AI enthusiast, I might not have gotten to it right away, or prioritized it. Also, I think it's the diversity of perspectives too, of like, what do we want to stand for in terms of new things like watermarking and what are we going to use generative AI for and what aren't we going to use for? Are we going to do avatars or not? And even regardless of what your corporate technology or like C-suite thinks, like marketing should have its own point of view and have their own case for things as well related to our work. At the same time, driving enablement, like office hours, global enablement sessions. Imagine if like that is also could be one of my full-time roles, right? And yet if you have a group of people who can also like come into where's your passion area, where do you want to lean into, making sure we've got like all things firing in terms of communication and championing and sharing. And also now you can run concurrent pilots at the same time. And again, the benefit of doing it as a group together is you're aligned in how you approach pilots, hopefully, because everyone's trained or certified from the same piloting perspective, and you're rolling them up on a regular basis. And you're learning from each other along the way too. So I think it just really helps align and scale.
I love it. And if I tracked it right, you said director and below, right? On the committee. So this is really interesting because I find that some people try and make these councils very senior because it's like decision maker. And I think there's a lot of value to get the people involved that are actually doing the work. Not that executives don't do work, but you know what I mean? What's your thought on that? Like the director and below, that was interesting to me. That stood out when you'd said it.
Yeah, so we were really purposeful in that at VMware because it organically started very grounds up. And I soon realized that the makeup of people we had was director level and below. And then, as you know, eventually we got our CMO on board as our exec sponsor. I believe we were able to do so much so quickly because we weren't using more busy and or sometimes respectfully bureaucratic key levels who just for whatever, it's more of a governing body, right? Like we've had like content councils that are, to your point, more governing, like, are we going to move forward with this large content project or not type of thing. Right. I do think, of course, the companies need a C-suite driven AI council that is very enterprise-wide org compliance, security, governance, tech related. I believe within the functional councils, it should be more hands to keyboard doers, people who are closer to the workflows. I am also really passionate that this is a huge opportunity to empower new leaders. So I have sort of a criteria also. I'm not looking at it so off the top of my head, like who is regularly sharing how they're using AI with the teams without being asked, right? So proactively. Who seems eager for new projects or is a potential leader, but yet hasn't gotten that opportunity or that visibility. Who seems like they'd be passionate about this and they're not already overloaded with their current work, because we need somebody who will willingly work a little bit above and beyond. They still have to do their day-to-day job. And so this can't get in the way of that. So if somebody is already overwhelmed and stressed with their day-to-day job, no matter how much they like AI, may not be the right role for this. So this is a little bit of my like taking what we did at VMware, but also thinking, okay, how do I recreate this in a way? you may have a few senior directors because you need to stay tight on the strategy. Will the person bring up the right perspective you would want to have, let's say, on a branding creative side? So those roles may be really different. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
That's super interesting. I want to go back to what you had said originally around, marketing AI transformation office being, hey, assessing readiness. I think that was one of the foundational pieces, right? Like foundational readiness. If a CMO says, I want to know if our org is ready, truly ready for AI and to take on AI powered projects and find AI powered workflows, what are some of the things that they need to look for to be like, hey, we can take this journey?
Yeah. I think we have to assess our current state of AI literacy. And I think some people think of that as you're just going to bring in a bunch of new tools. But as we already mentioned, right, it's this understanding of what it can do. And so without that, then you have people only thinking about, for example, Copilot for meeting notes. And like that's the bar of like AI transformation is like, I can summarize my meetings and send out action items, because they don't yet understand all of the capabilities of what generative AI can do. On the flip side, if they don't understand what's in it for them and like the growth opportunity side of it from how it can transform your role and your career, why would they be motivated to change the way that they work today? So there's this also like, we have to help people realize like the what's in it for me. And if you talk too much about chat bots and like content creation, you lose your ops teams because they're like, I don't do that. And then you're like, yeah, but like there is so much more to your day-to-day work than just the personal productivity side of things.
Right.
So I now think of it in terms of personal productivity mindset and transformational marketing mindset. And so I'm using these two levers now to look at like mindset is not just mindset, right? Because you can have a personal productivity mindset and also you may have teams who aren't even there yet. They're like afraid to use Copilot because they don't know how to prompt, right? So like getting people to that personal productivity, but talking to people who are just in the personal productivity mindset about changing the way that they do their work for marketing is hard because they don't understand that that's even a possibility or out there.
Right.
So now you potentially get into this measurement of like percent of people who can imagine or ideate on a new way of doing their work with AI. And so I think that there's these two new interesting levers when it comes to mindset to make sure that you have an organization that is even ready to transform, to your point, because there are so many different levels of that.
I like the distinction there, the personal productivity mindset versus the transformation mindset. I mean, I guess you could look at this next question in both ways, both mindsets, but I feel like you have, again, a unique perspective, seeing how organizations have implemented AI. You've been on the vendor side as well. What are the most practical AI use cases that you've seen, and maybe most practical or also maybe most like underrated that like people may not be thinking of? And I guess you could look at that both from either like a personal productivity mindset or a transformation mindset. What's your thoughts on that?
My bias is toward the transformation mindset. But as a new Copilot user, people have shit on Copilot, I feel like, in the industry for the past few years. And I love it. Like, it is very useful. Awesome. In the Microsoft 365, having it connected to all your Microsoft apps. I've been doing my weekly summaries for it, and I'm shocked at like what it's pulling from where, because it just has access to everything. So don't overlook Copilot is like one of my big
Good point
overall. And the agent build side of that, I think, is interesting with Power Automate and things like that. Also, because I'm coming from Jasper, like I'm coming back to content, campaign use cases, like the whole campaign production of the persona build, the audience research that puts together your campaign brief that pulls together like exactly what content you're going to create. Maybe it is that anchor content, maybe it's human created anchor content, but then the campaign bill of materials. And I know you love this one too. The campaign bomb is one of my favorite use cases because I also just feel like it's so versatile. Like you could have your global campaign bomb, then you have your globalization, localization factor of it, which is a separate related use case that usually also sees a lot of time or cost savings depending on the process today. And then you have your partner bomb, which I know you love as well. And this is a fresh topic for me as well in terms of like, are there dedicated partner campaigns or not? And then how do you take that global bomb and partnertize it from that perspective? And then vertical from, there. So you've got your standard ICPs and an enterprise standpoint, and then you've got your vertical cuts, which especially if you already have that vertical messaging piece, that's the easy part in some ways too. So I just think that's such a low-hanging fruit, lower effort right? Like depending on your tech stack with really big impact. And then I think the underrated one and just the one that's harder, but has a bigger impact is that one-to-one ABM side of things. And so I think you see teams that like have it figured out and then other teams that can't quite figure it out yet. And I also think it's because ABM means something different to everyone. But I love like Jasper's use case in that too, even though they're not an enterprise organization, like building an entirely new workflow from scratch. So like, how do you measure the impact on something that didn't happen before? So it's an example of an entirely new workflow that was not possible before AI. So what they did is they looked at the time that it took to build the workflow. And then they saw that it was a 20x ROI on that time because they were actually with this new workflow getting responses from an email to demo cadence, basically is what it was, by featuring the personalization levers that Jasper could do like in product, but completely like one-to-one in all of that. So it looks different for everyone. You have to map out like, what is our ABM process today? And like, if we were to redefine it, what would it look like? And just like, that's like whiteboard magic wand, but those are the types of sessions. Get like a solutions engineer minded person in there, right? And a lot of vendors now are talking about forward deployed architects. And so I always say like marketers, I'm going off on a tangent here now, but
it's great.
The technical side of this is hard, right? So you've got to have the right people in the room to reimagine what the workflow could look like. And then the technical side to say like, okay, how could I put this together? And so from a forward deployed architect perspective, you're either going to pay a vendor, to do that, which is why OpenAI is investing, funding all of these consultants. You're seeing these forward deployed architects show up in vendor organizations, or you're going to pay a consultant to do that who has to learn your business and sit in your meetings, or you're going to have to beg corporate technology and, central IT to give you the resources to help you build all of that, or you're going to hire it inside of marketing. And so that's the marketing AI architect role that I think we're already starting to see it in some organizations. For example, Fortune like 100 hardware company, they've got an AI product manager inside their marketing org who is like the technical orchestrator. Okay. Somebody in marketing who can build automations. And it could be in something simple as like a Workato, but like, let's say we want to take your Excel spreadsheet of all of your web pages, right? And we've put scores and we're going to optimize them for SEO, AEO, right? What are we calling on? And like, what is the back end prompting? And for example, in Jasper, this is like, it's maybe touching Jasper and it's got your brand voice, but then we need it to spit out in Excel or in your Google Sheets. Someone has to build that connector, right? And some of those instructions too. And so that's, again, we're either outsourcing that or potentially insourcing that. And the closer we can get this inside of our teams, sitting in the meetings also where we're brainstorming things, they're going to be able to connect the dots and look and build the process flows, right? In terms of like, how are we actually going to get this done? What is the flow visual of our process today? Where does AI come in and sit into this process going forward? And where are these technical connection points and even like decision points, right? Where are the human stop gaps where we're going to have human review and the logic behind it all? And that's hard for most marketers to think about or put together.
That is really interesting. What was that role that you had said? The AI?
A marketing AI architect.
Marketing AI architect. That's key, because I think that, someone has to be able to look at it with like this kind of engineer mindset and go, I know how to design a workflow, or, be able to do the orchestration piece. That is, again, I think another example of a role that didn't exist before AI, that I think we're going to need a lot of these individuals, right? Because that's going to be key to scale.
Yeah.
So I love that. And just the piece on the Copilot, I agree. I feel like people give Copilot a tough time, which if you are really like, again, I mean, we're full stack Microsoft too. So we kind of see that benefit of like, it pulls in everything. When everything is integrated, it becomes more, trusted, and you could do more things. And so I think, don't underestimate some of these tools that are directly plugged into your stack that you might even have access to already.
Yes.
And you're not exploring the full uses of Copilot or custom Copilots, or right. So
yeah, exactly.
I wanted to double click on the ROI side and like proving impact for a sec. So I feel like, marketers are under pressure, right? Before it was, if it had AI on it, you'll get the investment. Now it's show me the ROI. And to your point on Jasper, creating a new workflow and then not really having a easy baseline, because you're creating something new as opposed to improving an existing process. But my question is just, how do you communicate that internally? Like, if telling the full ROI story when some of it isn't so like we've got a baseline and we measured against the baseline, like how do you justify that? Because I feel like we don't do a good enough job as marketers to convey that, like the full return on this AI investment.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that it comes back to the baseline. So beyond that, we at Jasper have a value engineering team, and they're like ex-Deloitte consultants. And so you're starting to hear like value realization pop up more, but also just for transparency, like I hadn't been in an organization where we had a value engineering team. So I learned so much from them in terms of that up-leveling the impact to C-suite value. And it's this concept that like the C-suite and, if you're a public company, shareholders care about like three things: efficiency at the bottom, revenue on top, and mitigating risk in the middle. So what that looks like from a brand or marketing perspective then is, this is your efficiency metrics, right? Your time savings. Your revenue becomes like your lagging metric, right? So like ultimately you should see things change, right? And that's your performance side of things, right? So like time and cost savings, this is your performance. And then your brand control, your brand consistency is in the middle, in terms of AI enabling and helping us with a more consistent brand voice. And so if you overthink that, it's like, you don't need to overthink that. Like, that's all it is. It's like saving money at the bottom, making money at the top, and mitigating risk in the middle. And so that's when it comes down to like, okay, time savings could be labor cost avoidance, whether that's internal or external. So reducing reliance on external resources, or doing more work with the same team internally. So like I had a client who lost a team member. They didn't get to backfill that role, and they were able to not only maintain the content volume, but improve it over time with Jasper. So that's a great example of labor cost avoidance while continuing to maintain, and then, like I said, even increasing the volume of work that they were doing for the business. And so it's kind of that simple. And I think sometimes we just overthink it. And then there's calculations where I think it's helpful to look at like all in cost per hour, like from a labor cost avoidance perspective. And you can use AI to help you calculate this as well if your organization doesn't have it. But let's say it's like a $75 an hour all baked cost, right? Yeah. It just turns it into a tangible value, right? Where we're seeing over $1 million of savings, let's say, across these 30 AI use cases that we're tracking from just a time savings perspective. Right. So that is, and we're able to maintain our work. And then ultimately, when you're trying to do more, that's when you're hopefully seeing the lift from marketing metrics that hopefully you're already tracking.
Yeah, I love what you said about like, don't overcomplicate this. I think we try and do this like the mathematical gymnastics. And then it's like, break it down in these like core things that the org cares about, like efficiency and some of these, like, for example, the cost per hour. I love that. Yeah, I find that sometimes the calculus gets so complicated that like nobody understands what what the metric actually is anymore.
Yeah. But I think that's where it comes down to I am glad I'm not on the hook for the ROI of Copilot. So,
right.
but you only need a few high impact use cases that the value will like show, the ROI for the entire system that marketing is on the hook for, right? Or wanting to communicate. And the example that I always give of that, of course, is that VMware one where it was a $500,000 savings a year. Like the rest of the marketing team could have done all these other use cases, and my team's one use case is paying for it all, right? So that's what allows you to continue to innovate and like find those other high impact use cases, and why you have to focus in on like that value and effort side of things.
Can you just, for the sake of everyone listening, that use case that you did at VMware, is that something you could share like at a high level or?
Yeah. And I know that you're not offended by this because we've chatted about this before. I'm going to talk about agencies for a second.
Yes. Right? Yeah. Go for it.
So caveat, Andrew is cool with this use case. But yeah, so this was, I'd already been focusing on our content operations. So I knew how long it took us in each stage. And we quickly found out that it could take one of our agencies, who is a copy shop for us, up to 6 weeks to start one of our BOM projects. Right. So this is the campaign, the promotional surround of that anchor content from a copy perspective. And so we could draft that same content in one day with Jasper. And then we eventually built this custom app, or they may call it a custom workflow now, that created and was customized for our entire BOM. And we could also fine tune it, or, with drop downs, change it by vertical, by the type of content asset that it was. Like, is it an ebook or is it a webinar? What's the CTA? Is this for awareness or demand gen? And really fine tune this. And we got it down to draft to production approval ready in 3 days. So 98% quality and one shot output, getting it fully approved in 3 days. And so when you take the cost that we were spending with that agency, and then you look at how many bombs we create every quarter, and you do the math on all of that, that got to $500,000 savings a year.
Amazing. And honestly, I think that as an agency like ours, like we're obviously very AI forward, we're bringing that into the workflow. And I think that you can, as an agency, leverage these kinds of tools and build your own proprietary workflow to do more for the client, like be able to build more complex bombs and more of them, et cetera. But there are certainly use cases that, and we're building AI agents that can basically do some of the, let's call it the more like baseline commoditized stuff. Like we're actually building it for our clients who are global tech, allowing them to do some of that themselves, because there's so much work to do. Like there's never a shortage of work. It's just, there's a shortage of hours and resources to get it all done. Right. So no, fully a fan of that.
Well, and you guys are one of the most forward AI agencies that I know. And I love your concept of sandboxing for your clients, right? So you may have clients who aren't approved to do XYZ internally, but you guys can test it out and also be that test bed for them to go internally and say, look, we've proven this already. Now let us do this at scale. And I think that is such a cool role that you guys play in that. But then also you can say, and next we're going to test out this crazy use case, right? Right. And then just be that innovator. And that is what the value of agencies should be, is that partner who's like looking around the corner and giving you ideas that you haven't had time to think about, like let alone execute. And so I always caveat that to say, like, if you have an agency that is just a copy shop and it's mediocre at best, like that is the best use case to start with, because you will see so much ROI from a time and cost savings perspective. So yeah.
So related to this, I mean, obviously there's the whole like AI versus human and what, where does that go, and impact to labor markets and all that kind of stuff. What have you kind of learned throughout your journey around, reassuring people that it's still a human first approach, but we want you to leverage AI. Like, how do you manage the human side of this as people evaluate, wait, should I embrace this? Like, what if it takes my job kind of thing? I mean, you're living proof that it creates jobs too, but
yeah,
what have you learned on that? Like, how do you manage the human reaction to some of this?
yeah. I think there's a couple different things. Like even as a leader, you want to embrace your doubters and skeptics for sure, especially those skeptics. And I have something called the Herds framework. Maybe you can put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Where you want to listen to the people who are digging their heels in the ground, because they wouldn't be doing that if they didn't care. They would just be apathetic to the whole thing. So what is their reason? Because it may be something you haven't thought of, or it may be just a conversation you need to have with them, reassuring them about different things, right? The use case could be different there in terms of what's causing their reaction. But if you can get them on your side, or on the side of, okay, let's do this as part of your role, and let's also not replace the things that you love, right? They can become one of your number one advocates and champions for AI.
Great point.
So I think it's this concept too that's often talked about as well. That's like, if you love to write, like don't use AI to do that. But like you cannot sit there and tell me you love every single thing about your job, you know? And so like, let's use that as your first foray into using AI just to get your feet wet. And I guarantee you're going to see and be surprised at how much it can do. And also think about all the other ways that you can use it for other things as well. So that's just a small piece of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there are definitely aspects of the job that we don't feel excited about that AI can absolutely do with great proficiency.
And it might not nail it out of the bag too. So that's where you have to have, it has to be painful enough too, that you have the tenacity to get through the problem solving side of it to come out the other side, I think. Yeah. And that's what separates people from like people who just dabble and the people who are going to excel and lead in their careers too, is that problem solving capability to want to work through it and figure it out. Because once they figure it out, you know, rocket ship, I guess, from there.
Yeah. What a great way to end the session on. I mean, absolutely. I think there's tons of opportunity to really, create that rocket and find new use cases that create business impact. Jessica, you're a busy woman doing a lot of really important things. We just want to say thank you so much for the time. Really loved our discussion. And I feel like we can definitely unpack a few of these things on a future episode.
Absolutely. So much fun. Thank you for having me.